All right. Hi, Jay. How are you?
Doing okay. How are you doing today?
Good. Doing fine. I was just looking at that picture behind your shoulder there, Moby, and
Yes,
I thought that was the movie that I just interviewed Steve Alton. Do you know Steve Alton? He wrote
I do not.
the Meg is the name of the
Oh,
film.
Meg. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No. This is a mashup of the same poster design from Jaws,
Oh,
just
okay.
replaced with Moby Dick.
With Moby Dick. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Oh, interesting. All right. Speaking of interesting, your bio also is very interesting. And I wanted to get to your book. You've actually written a book that is sort of an advice book, a self-help book for aspiring authors. Yeah.
I wouldn't exactly say it's a self-help book for aspiring authors. It is a book of advice columns, but it's a book of fictional advice columns. And the people who are writing in for advice are characters from classic literature.
Oh, I see. Okay. So, what exactly is the point then?
So the point, as far as I tried to approach it, is, and I have a background in doing adaptations of classics, either for the stage or for other kinds of media or new media. And in fact, kind of, I think one of the things that I am most interested in as a storyteller is taking classic stories and updating them, remixing them, recreating and recontextualizing them for modern times or different time periods. And it's always been a contention of mine, or an interest of mine anyway, that a lot of the stories that we think of as classics, we tend to distance ourselves from, mostly probably because we were forced to read them in school or they were presented to us as the literary version of vegetables. Eat this, it's good for you. And anybody who is forced to read anything,
Yeah.
there's going to be an intrinsic resistance. But if you can find a way past that, many of these stories that we consider classics or pieces of the canon were not all, but many of them were the blockbuster entertainments of their day. And so trying to find a way to get to the core story, the core message, the core relatability of these stories for modern audiences and looking at these classic characters as if they had the same problems that we have today. So, the book is full of characters from classic literature, like Ophelia from Hamlet writes in saying, "Hey, my boyfriend's kind of a big deal. It's great when it's just two of us, but whenever anyone else sees us, it gets all weird and there's a lot of pressure. And now my father and my brother are on my case, telling me that I shouldn't date him. What should I do?" Or Ishmael from Moby Dick writes in and says, "Hey, I met this guy. He's really awesome. We really hit it off well. I'm like totally into him. Except now he's saying, hey, should we go on a 3-year whaling voyage together? And is that too much too soon?" Um,
Okay.
and it sort of kind of continues along in that vein, taking all of these characters and treating their story problems as if they were the real problems of real people.
All right. I totally misinterpreted your your bio then. So I apologize for that because I was under the impression that this was a book to help authors with their fictional characters in developing them.
No.
And that's how I read that. So I apologize for misinterpreting that. Okay, so this is really just uh, entertainment book.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
hope.
Okay.
I mean, that's the goal. um, and the way that me and my editor and the publishers at Chiller Press talked about this book at the beginning when we were sort of in the initial stages of putting it together is we thought about everyone has someone in their life who loves literature. Sometimes we are the person in someone else's life who loves literature. And this is the kind of thing that we hoped anyway, that if you saw it in the bookstore, you would say, oh, I know exactly who would love this, and I'm going to get this for them as a gift. The fly in that ointment was with the pandemic, most of the bookstores, at least here in Los Angeles anyway, are closed, and you can't go in them, and you can't browse around and catch the eye of catch the a glimpse of the book on your way to the register. So that kind of didn't really work out. But still, it is still meant to be a love letter, or I guess many love letters to different kinds of literature.
I did see something on here about you've won some Emmy Awards. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And there's a couple of cool titles: Airship Dracula,
Yes.
Dirty Work. But I wanted to ask you about something I saw in here called social media storytelling.
Yes.
For somebody who's, over 30 years old, what exactly is that?
So social media storytelling is one of those. It's funny. It's a thing that when I first started doing it in, I'd say around 2007, 2008, there was a lot of confusion, or I had a lot of conversations trying to explain why someone would do this. I think actually, if you take a step back and look at the way that we all live now, it's a lot easier to kind of see how this works. Most of us anyway, go through our day getting news and information from little bits of snippets from lots of different places.
Yeah.
You see something on one social media platform, you see something that someone posts on Twitter, and then you see something else that someone posts on Facebook, and then you see a little thing on the TV news, and then you hear a little thing on the radio. And we as individuals sit in the middle of all of that. And we take these little bits of information and we weave them together to tell a story. And so around 2007, 2008, when social media was first starting to become really popular, I started thinking about how you could use those tools to tell fictional stories and to make the social media platforms the actual conduit for storytelling. So I wrote one of the first Twitter novels back in 2007. And Because I'm Me, it was an adaptation of a Herman Melville short story called Benito Sereno that I redid as a sci-fi story. And I created a Twitter account for it. It was called The Good Captain. And 8 to 12 times a day, that account would post over the span of about 4 months telling this story. And it was 2007, back when most of the time when you had a conversation about Twitter, the conversation went something like, why do I care what you had for lunch? And we had no inkling that this would be something that could, be involved in the fate of Western democracy in a little more than a decade. It was a much, much more innocent time. But what I found really interesting about it was here was a way of putting little bits of story into someone's day, mixed in with all of the real world stuff they were doing, that kind of dripped out in these little pieces and allowed a story to merge with the background fabric of their day. And that was kind of the start of a period of experimentation where, lots of new social media networks were popping up. I would kind of come up with story ideas, ways to use these different platforms or these different media to tell stories. A lot of experiments. One of my favorite was one year, I think it was 2009, I was attending the South by Southwest conference in Austin, Texas. And I got a bunch of people together, about 20 people together, and we all used our Twitter accounts to reenact the attack on the Death Star from the end of the first Star Wars movie, just playing it out on Twitter in real time. And it was just kind of like a fun, I thought, hey, this will be fun. And we came up with a hashtag for it, which was South by Star Wars. So every time anyone posted something, the next line in the story, they would add the tweet, they would add the hashtag South by Star Wars. Our little play, took about 90 minutes. And the hashtag, people jumping in on Twitter and reposting and responding and adding new things to it, using that hashtag went on for another 2 days. And I think that was a moment when I realized that there was something really, really powerful in social media storytelling. And so, yeah, so I just kept kind of trying things out, doing experiments, and all of that sort of culminated in 2012. I was hired to join a project called the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. And that show was a modern adaptation of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice that was primarily told on YouTube in the form of these short little 4 to 6 minute YouTube videos. They were filmed as if they were vlogs of, people who just are filming themselves talking to camera, uploading them to their, YouTube channel, talking about the ins and outs of their daily life. Except the person who was doing that in our world was Elizabeth Bennet, who was a 24-year-old grad student who is living at home with under a mountain of student debt. And her best friend Charlotte was behind the camera. And her sisters, Jane and Lydia, would run in and out of the room with updates about, oh my God, mom is freaking out. This rich young medical student just moved to the neighborhood and she's totally obsessed with like one of us hooking up with him. And so the show was, this central plank of the show was this YouTube channel that would tell the story of Pride and Prejudice in these short little vlog bites. But what I was brought on to do for the show was to expand it so that all of these characters had a life on social media. So all of the characters had Twitter accounts, Facebook pages, Tumblr pages. They talked to each other in between the episodes. They talked to the audience in between the episodes. The audience could ask them questions and they would respond in character. And what that created was the sense that this story was always on, always real, unfolding in real time. And at any given moment, something might happen. And we ended up doing this for almost an entire year, entire calendar year, played out the entirety of Pride and Prejudice. And I think by the end, we were on 5 or 6 different YouTube channels, about 35 different individual social media profiles across a half a dozen different networks. And that was the project that won an Emmy Award for interactive storytelling.
While you were telling me all of this, my mind was going to War of the Worlds.
Yes.
And I think there is a parallel to be drawn there between the idea. But the one question that I did want to ask is, do you have to put any sort of a disclaimer on your stories and characters and accounts of people that don't exist?
So this is actually a really big hot button topic. And not to, delve into an entirely different story, but a lot of my experience and a lot of the experiences that I had that inspired me to do this kind of storytelling was born out of this subgenre of interactive games that go by the name alternate reality game, or the shorthand for that is ARG. The first, what is considered now the first ARG, was a marketing campaign for the Steven Spielberg movie AI in 2001.
Oh, okay.
And I got involved in that as a player, as a participant. And it was the thing that opened my eyes to the idea that you could use technology and the internet as a real world storytelling platform to tell stories that lived in the world all around us. The creators of that game had an ethic. It was a design principle that later on they would talk about. And this design principle was called, "This is not a game." And the idea was that this game would never, ever tell you that it was fictional. It would act as if it was totally real. It would never cop to the fact that it was made up. And that was really super exciting at first. And there were a lot of us who played that game and played other games around the same time who decided we wanted to go into this type of storytelling. And we did. And there were a lot of projects that came afterwards. And what we discovered relatively quickly is that "This is not a game" doesn't actually work because of exactly what you were just asking about. That when an audience doesn't know if it's real or fake, you are asking for their buy-in under the cover of basically a lie. And a lot of times, what ended up happening, and this happens over and over and over again, where people would create these projects and they would make it seem real and exciting and captivating, and then at the end they would be like, and it was just it was a story, haha, wasn't that fun? And audiences turned on them and reacted as if they were being hoaxed, because that's what it feels like when you're an
Right.
audience member and you
Yeah.
don't know if something's real or not. And I've over the years done a lot of work. I get hired a lot of times to work on interactive marketing projects, viral storytelling projects. And this is a conversation I have to have at least once or twice a year with a potential new client, where the idea is, hey, we're going to like do this thing, and we're not going to say that it's a story, and everyone's going to get all excited. And then at the end, we'll like come out from behind the curtain and say, hey, it was a story. Wasn't that great? And I have to say, actually, no, that won't happen that way. What will happen is they will hate you. And
Yeah.
it's hard for people to understand that until it happens to them. So to be honest, I've not gotten a lot of jobs because I've said, no, we can't do that. And people decide they want to do it anyway, and they go off and they do a thing, and they, bites them in the butt, and hopefully they learn. But
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm a very big believer in label it as fictional up front, because then you are inviting the audience in to the experience, and you are giving them the power to endow the story with this fictional story with this real world patina. If you don't do it, you're lying to
Jay, we got to wrap this up. We've kind of gone way over, unfortunately. I
them.
know we could have gone on a lot
I can
for
do that.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to sum up that whole situation, to me, it's like I remember when online dating first started, and I think the term is called catfishing. And
Hmm.
it's just another aspect of this idea of people creating alternate personalities online. And I don't know if people live in the alternative reality, the real reality is going to go to crap real quick.
I
And
mean, we've
if we've
kind of
seen
already
any,
done that.
we're kind of halfway there anyways with the likes of this past year.
Yeah.
So, it's a whole nother conversation for another show.
Yeah.
Do you have a website that you want to give out where people can come check out your work?
I do. You can see my stuff at jbushman.com, and I'm Jay Bushman. That's JayBushman, and pretty much any social media platform you can find me that way.
Great. Thanks so much for coming on the show. This was interesting. I know we could have gone on, but maybe we'll have you back for part 2 or something.